Right, you asked for it, so you've got it. You've asked for Stephen Nojiri to come back and talk about ninja psychology. So we're going to go through. So here is Stephen Nojiri.
Hello, my name is Stephen Nojiri, and I am the author of Samurai Traditions of the Tada Genji and Sacred Conspiracy, the commentary to the Fukushima Ryu Shinobi no Maki. And Anthony has asked me to work with him on this video, and in this video we're going to be discussing Shinobi psychology or ninja psychology.
My name's ANtony CUmmins, and I'm the author of Book of Bushido, which is now on Audible.
So then the first thing I want to say is that Shinobi psychology has two aspects. There's the actual mindset of the shinobi themselves, which can be broken down into parts. And then there's psychological tools of the shinobi, or the psychology that the shinobi use on other people, which can be broken down into multiple parts. And so we'll address a little bit of both of those.
So how does shinobi cope with the stress that they have, and how do they manipulate other people?
So then when we want to start with the psychology of the shinobi themselves, the shinobi's worldview, how the shinobis view the world, we have to understand that there is no single shinobi worldview. There are multiple traditions of shinobi because the shinobi come from different samurai traditions. That's the very first thing you have to understand. And historically speaking, I know people are real tempted to try to, quickly be like Iga and Koga, but the reality is when you're actually looking into the historical record, the two best traditions that we can find where we have a lot of documentation and a very clear culture of the shinobi is what I identify as the Koshu cluster and the Kusunoki cluster. And the Koshu cluster circles around the material gathered by Obata Sensei, which is roughly called the Takeda tradition, but that's not exactly correct. It's Takeda tradition through Obata Sensei. And they have a particular worldview, a particular way of doing things. And then the Kusunoki cluster centers around the Kusunoki traditions, the Tada Genji tradition, Yoshitsune Ryu tradition, Jingunden, etc., etc. And they have a very particular worldview. So you have to start there. Well, you don't have to start there, but I would advise they are two of the best examples of shinobi culture that is recorded in great detail. So I will use those to proceed forward.
If you want to know where to get them, the best thing to do is just buy Stephen's books. Please support Stephen, get his books, get yourself a copy, read up on them, see what you think of what he's saying. Now, basically, everybody knows Iga and Koga, and they say, oh, that's where ninja started. Even the people from Iga and Koga don't say that's where it started. What we know about the ninja is that the word comes up at around 1560 out of nowhere. Again, because it's originally with the Taiheki. But it disappears, then the word comes out of nowhere, and that's it. Then it's on the world picture.
Of course, that's not to say that Iga and Koga should not have some representation, but I'm not going to discuss them very much because my specialty is the Kusunoki cluster. So therefore, and also Iga's culture is written down usually by outsiders, and it's not until the late 1600s and into the 1700s that people who are participating in the Iga and Koga cultures are really writing about them. Again, most of the material is written by outsiders. Whereas with the Koshu cluster and the Kusunoki cluster, which, by the way, Kusunoki cluster contains Fukushima Ryu. For those who know me, they know I love Fukushima Ryu. So those are being written by the members of those traditions at the time that they are living. So those documents are written by people who are living the traditions. And that's why I would say let's focus on those, or I will focus on those for the purpose of this video. So my specialty is the Kusunoki cluster, which is Kusunoki Ryu, the main tradition, and the branch traditions, the Jingunden, the Tada Genji tradition, the Southern Core tradition, and Fukushima Ryu. I will not be speaking about the Koshu tradition, but because I only know it basically. However, that having been said though, it is important for the viewer to understand the difference. So Koshu Ryu is about a war of attrition. Kill the enemy to defeat the enemy. And thus the shinobi are more related to sabotage, setting fires, doing ambushes, things like that. Whereas the Kusunoki cluster is more about diplomacy. and therefore the shinobi are more about spying and information gathering, setting up conspiracies. So a major part of the Kusunoki cluster is acquiring turncoats, getting people to betray their side and join your side. That's one of the key factors of the tradition that I'm going to speak about.
We always have this problem, guys, and we always return to it. The ninja information we have, the Shinobi no Mono information we have, is given to us later. And even though Stephen's saying there, what you have in to explain what Stephen's going on about, you get Fukushima scrolls, which are said to be written by Fukushima Masanori and then copied later in the 1700s. But then you also get lots of information that is, quote unquote, whatever, not shinobi, but is shinobi. So for example, it doesn't say, here's what ninja do. It's like, here's our deception. Here's how we run deception. So this is where it gets difficult, because we stray across the line into what is ninja, what is not ninja, what is deception, how much is there a separation between the identity of samurai and the identity of ninja, or a samurai who is shinobi. Them lines have to be crossed. And by the way, this is a long video, so sit back, relax, enjoy it like a fine honey.
So within the Kusunoki cluster, we then have to break it down into two more divisions, and that would be the actual shinobi, the samurai sent by his lord into enemy territory to commit a conspiracy, versus or compared against locals within the enemy territory who have been caused to turn against their side by the shinobi. So the actual shinobi, the samurai who is the espionage agent, goes into the enemy territory, finds people in the enemy territory to convert to his cause. Now, some documents say they are all shinobi. Some documents clearly point out that only the original retainer sent into the foreign territory is the shinobi. So we have to be clear about who we're talking about here. And so for the sake of this video, I'm going to go with the most conservative viewpoint, and that is that the shinobi is only the retainer sent by his lord into the enemy territory, and we are not going to be referring to the locals who are converted to the cause.
This is where things can really get confusing, because we are building up to what is ninja psychology, but you have to really work out what is a ninja. So we would love it if there was a guy over here in his little hut, in his little house, praying with his little ninja suit on, and he's a ninja and he does ninja things and he gets his ninja sword off the wall, and there's another guy over there who's a samurai, does his samurai things, gets his samurai. That would be very easy, but that's not the case. In real life, the ninja were samurai, and basically sometimes a samurai was working as a shinobi for a lord, sometimes an enemy samurai was turned. It might have just been a shopkeeper who was turned. The word shinobi might just mean that guy that we turned, the shopkeeper who's never done a bit of spying in his life, but he just writes down the amount of troops who've come in and out of his shop. It could be the highly trained double agent who works both sides. It could be anyone within there. But what Stephen's saying is we're going to hone it down and go for basically, I said, the most conservative view is the professional shinobi. What is it they think? What is it they do?
So at this point, the viewer needs to understand a key point here, and that is that in the more attrition-based systems, almost always the shinobi who is sneaking in and setting fires and burning stuff down is generally the shinobi sent by the Lord. Now in the Kusunoki cluster, the shinobi possesses that knowledge and has those skill sets. And so if need be, that shinobi will sneak in at night and set fires, etc., etc. But in the Kusunoki tradition, it's part of the psychology to use other people for those functions. So Kusunoki cluster shinobi psychology says that the samurai spy, the real ninja, the real shinobi, needs to convert locals and train the locals in how to do these things, and then send the locals into these dangerous operations. So having identified those two primary factors, getting others to do the dirty work for you because you have a covert diplomacy versus attrition as your primary foundational viewpoint, we can now move into discussing psychology of the actual tactics. And so the first thing that I want to say is within the Kusunoki cluster, you have a system called Niso Daigo. And on my channel, I have lots of videos and materials, and in the books that I've produced, lots of materials discussing this in detail. But for the sake of this video, I can introduce it very simply. Niso Daigo means great liberation of the two phases. And the two phases means the eyes and the ears. But that doesn't refer to your actual eyes and ears. That's a code word for people who are interested in pursuing their own desires, which would be the eyes, and people who are interested in pursuing the events of the world, which would be the ears. And just so the viewers know, the Tada Genji tradition has this same division, but they explain it as wise and foolish. So those who are the eyes are called foolish, and those who are the ears are called wise, because again, people of the eyes are more about self-gratification, and people who are about the ears are more about being concerned with worldly activities. And so within a sort of samurai culture, the idea is if you are focused on your sense gratifications, you're foolish, and if you're concerned with worldly affairs, then you would be considered wise. And then when we get into other traditions, Iga and Koga have some measure of Niso Daigo, because we know from Chikamatsu's writings with Kimura Sensei, he mentions the Niso Daigo. And also we know from pretty much any other tradition that's related to the Kusunoki cluster, like the Jingunden and Fukushima-ryu would have Niso Daigo, but they wouldn't have different versions. They just have the Niso Daigo from Kusunoki-ryu.
So what Stephen is quoting here is my book, Iga and Koga Ninja Skills, the secret shinobi secret scrolls of Chikamatsu Shigenori. And on page 170, you'll see Sun Tzu emphasizes his point by saying heavily or complete, as it's of great importance. As mentioned in the traditions of Niso Daigo, everything originates from ears and eyes, and this is exactly what shinobi do as they travel thousands of ri across the mountains and rivers, serving as eyes and ears, and report all they see and hear to the Lord. So this is where we're saying all this type of thing is intermingled. So Stephen's saying here is that all these old traditions, Takeda traditions, Kusunoki traditions, which came before the rush of ninja manuals, is soaked into the traditions across Iga, Koka, Fukushima, Natori. They've all like sponges soaked it all up, and they're continuing it.
So Niso Daigo is very complex and would take a long time to really explain, but to break it down quickly and succinctly as an introduction, Niso Daigo attempts to identify the personality type of a person. It's very similar to the Myers-Briggs system in the sense that a person is either eyes or ears, and then the eyes, there's two major divisions, and the ears, there's two major divisions, and it all uses elements, so as the code word, so to speak. So the eyes break down to people of the water type and people of the earth type, and then the ears break down to people of the wind type or the fire type. And then each one of those, and then so that's your sort of primary personality type. So that's your first four. Then each one of the elements is broken down into a subtype, which there's 3 of each for a total of 12. So there's 12 subtypes with 4 main types, leads to a 16-point strategy. So Niso Daigo is also known as the attack method of 16 points, or the 16-point attack method. And so the general idea is that once you determine the personality type of the person, whether you first determine whether they're eyes or ears, and then which element, and then which subcategory. Once you have their personality type figured out, you then know how to properly support them or how to properly attack them. So it's a sort of a psychological profile of the person, and then the means and methods of which to manipulate that personality type.
Now, Isui Sensei from Natori, who wrote the Book of Samurai series, he basically talks about personality types in the Shoninki, and he talks about the 7 emotions and the mixture people have of the emotions. Now, we also talk about the Gonin, which is the 5 types of shinobi, not the Gokan, which is the 5 types of spy. And they also talk about personality types. So in Isui Sensei's writings, mainly the unpublished writings that I have. Basically, he has the Gonin, which are the 5 types of ninja spy, the 5 types of personality that you mix with the Gokhan, the different types of spy, and you can mix them two together. But also the 7 emotions of Buddhism, where it's like, is somebody more aggressively angry, are they love fulfilled? But he also talks about Mumon no Ikan, the gateless gate, which is actually a name from a monk who named a set of koan poems, who actually says this takes you through the gateless gate, the barrier between here and non-duality, which is known as funi in Japanese, which means no two. So without two, non-duality. So the idea of the oneness of the world, the one great thing, and you to see through all things. So when you pass through Mumon no Ikan, the gateless gate, and see the non-duality of the world, you see truth as it is. And so you've got to look at personality as the first step for seeing truth, which is the basis of the ninja. You have to look at personality types.
And it gets detailed. For example, it doesn't just say, "Oh, people who are easily distracted." It gets down to the level of easily distracted by what? Easily distracted by external objects like fine jewelry and performances and fancy things, or distracted by gossip, distracted by hanging out with friends. Because somebody who's distracted by fine things is a different approach than somebody who's distracted by idle chatter and gossip. It's a different personality type and is handled differently.
Shinobi, the basic job of a shinobi is to persuade people to do something they wouldn't normally do, or to manipulate a situation in a way that it wouldn't normally go. So one of the examples for this, probably from Chikamatsu's teachings, is some people will accept the smallest amount of gold, basically cash, for doing something because it seems non-high risk. Bizarrely, they'll do it cheaper because it seems too risky if there's too much money involved. But other people won't do something for a small amount of money because it's too much risk for a small amount of money. They'll need a lot of money. So it's just the psychology of it. Like, so for example, one of the ancient ways in China that they used to manipulate an enemy general was they used to say, okay, we can get an assassin into your tent at any time we want. In truth, they couldn't. It was a lie. So what they did is they manipulated or bribed one of the room attendants to place a dagger under his pillow. That guy's not going to assassinate him. He says, no way. He says, listen, I'll pay you $50,000 to slip this knife under the pillar. You don't have to do anything. That's all you have to do, and walk away. Some people would say, yeah, I'll do that for 50 grand. That's ace. But others would be like, oh, this is too complex for me. Whereas you come approach me and say, I'll give you $500 if you just slip that knife in. Like, okay, it doesn't seem that bad, the $500. It's just a knife. It's just a psychology. It's the same situation, but the psychology is turned around. So what you have to do is find the way that to manipulate them. Sometimes it's through honor, sometimes through money, sometimes through sex. What you have to do is find the button, there it is, that activate. They'll be like, okay, and you do this through the eyes and the ears. You watch and listen, test, watch, listen, test, probe, watch, listen, test, probe. Okay, is that one? Okay, approach. And then another shinobi will approach and say, I'll do this. You can be a shinobi in hiding and chat to that person, go back and report and say, I know his psychology, use this. And another shinobi approach him and say, listen, man in the dark shadow, I've got a job for you. Do you want to earn yourself £50,000? You know what I mean? That's how it's done.
It also makes distinctions, for example, of somebody who's sad because they're lonely and looking for a friend versus somebody who's sad because they have what we would now call almost certainly clinical depression. And it makes this distinction. It doesn't just say dealing with people who are sad. It's people who are sad because of this or in this way versus people who are sad in this way. So the way that you deal with somebody who's sad because they seek companionship and don't have it is a different personality type and is treated differently than someone who is depressed, for example. Completely different way of dealing with them.
Basically, ninjutsu is not one shoe fits all. You literally have to understand the outside. This is why in some of the manuals it says it's best if shinobi understand everything in the world. You know, they need to understand every situation, every subject. So you know a bit of this, bit of the T serum, a bit of that. You're in and out of society from low ranking to high ranking. You change to low ranking, you change to high ranking. You present yourself higher than you are, you present yourself lower than you are. You know about many things. You have a great grasp of the world. In the Book of Ninja, it talks about the Jonin, the 10 perfect aspects of being a perfect ninja, and they are literally dancing, poetry, flower arrangement, just knowing about things, and the psychology of others is your primary step for ninjutsu.
And so this system of psychologically mapping the target, whether they're your ally, because you are supposed to psychologically identify, map your allies so that you know how to support them correctly. And you're supposed to psychologically map out and identify the personality types of your enemies so that you know how to manipulate them and destroy them, etc., etc., etc. But this is the fundamental psychological system of the Kusunoki Shinobi cluster. So all of those different traditions, like the different Kusunoki systems, the Yoshitsune-ryu, Fukushima-ryu, etc., the Jingunden, Tadagenji, they all ultimately come under this sort of Kusunoki cluster, and this is the psychological system of which someone from the Kusunoki cluster uses.
Of course, I'm talking from different traditions, mainly the Natori tradition, and then, of course, you've got many other traditions that fit into that. Now, there's a few published and unpublished, so it's just unfortunate that we can't get more of these ninja stuff out there, but I do have quite a lot of unpublished ninja material. But unfortunately, Japan is not cool enough at the minute, so you guys have to go and buy all our books and things like that. So get yourself a copy of Stephen's book. If you want to start in ninjutsu, get yourself a copy of this. The more books on ninjutsu we both sell, guys, the more the publishers are happy and everybody's happy, and the more it gets out. But you guys need to start talking about ninjutsu more. Once you guys found out, and I don't mean you personally, I mean the world, found out that ninjas didn't run around in black pajamas throwing shurikens at each other, suddenly, and it was difficult to understand, suddenly they were not so cool and nobody really cared about them. But we can do it again, and together you can help us bring the ninja back to the forefront.
Now, I also need to be very clear that just because all of these different traditions are part of the same cluster, they have the shared heritage. They don't always agree within a cluster. The traditions will have variations, and they won't agree on certain things. Like, so, for example, another ninja psychology bit is the psychology of astrology, right? So, some traditions really follow the astrology of the day, the time, the hour, the stars, the directions. Some follow it, and then some do not. So, for example, in Kusunoki actually himself, well, allegedly himself, or within the main tradition itself, it basically says that even though there are all of these traditions of following the direction and time and the stars, you should actually let the details of the battlefield or the details of the situation determine whether you move or not. Whereas other traditions rely heavily on the astrology part.
Right, let me explain a little something here for you. The earliest ninja tradition we have is most likely the first chapter, I think it's the second chapter, sorry, of the Shinobi Hiden. But it's been disputed. But what's undisputed is the Shinobi of three chapters of Gunpo Jiyoshu, which are circa 1612. Now, Kusunoki Master Shige was in the 1300s, Yoshitsune was in the 1200s, yeah, around that time. So we actually don't know, and Stephen said there, we don't know if they actually wrote this stuff or if this is direct from them, but it is recorded that it is. So a lot of these traditions coming up share commonalities because they've come out of an unknown black past. It's just darkness, and they've been attached to names. Whether they actually came from Kusunoki, we don't know. Whether they actually came from Yoshitsune, we don't know, because often people use famous names, and these are famous names in Japan, to attach their traditions onto them. So we don't know how far. So even if it's called Kusunoki tradition, it might never have been done by Kusunoki. We don't know. But the point is, that's its name. That's the name it's identified as. And we hope that it was really Kusunoki Master Shige who was doing all this. So, and then onto astrology. This is the difficult bit. This is where most people switch off, because it's medieval madness, guys. Don't forget. People say, "Oh, what do the ninja believe?" Well, the ninja believe that the stars have power on Earth now, and they have power to change things, and the fate is directed by stars, and stars are interconnected with the world. And some traditions went, "That's a load of nonsense." That was it. Even in the medieval times, they went, "Nonsense." And other people's believed in magic windmill arrows, and other people said, "Don't bother with that, just bother with straight tools." Some people are on about deep magic. Others say that's hocus pocus. That it's that blurring of psychology and magic, astrology and astronomy, all into one.
So in the Bansen Shukai, for example, just so you guys know, the Bansen Shukai quotes Kusunoki tradition heavily. A lot of the Bansen Shukai is Kusunoki-ryu. So in the Bansen Shukai, the Fujibayashi sensei basically says, I'm going to include all of this astrology stuff, even though a shinobi really shouldn't care about it. I'm going to include it all so that you know what other people may be sort of following, right? That's not the exact quote, but that's the gist of the quote. Now, again, that sort of follows the fundamental Kusunoki aspect where in Kusunoki-ryu, it's the details of the situation, not the stars. But we know that in Iga and Koga, for example, they're very big on the stars too. Most samurai traditions are big on the stars and the directions, etc., etc. The Tada-genji tradition, the Kusunoki tradition and the Tada-genji tradition are very tied together. Kusunoki doesn't really do anything with the stars and directions, but the Tada-genji tradition still does. So much so that the Tada-genji tradition still has its own Oboshiden, or tradition of the great star, where Kusunoki does not. So even though they're both part of the same tradition or the same heritage, on the topic of astrology, they differ greatly.
If this video does well and you guys help us along by supporting us, we might do a video on ninja magic. In fact, we need a series of these videos between me and Stephen, but they need to get good views to get Stephen out of his closet, basically. Like his little vampire coughing. Native American Indian flags and everything. He comes out with his feathers out. What do you want, Cummins? I want you to come out here, Stephen, and do some talking. Bugger off. That's pretty much. Stephen, the video got loads of views. Okay, I'm bloody coming. So that's what actually happens between me and Stephen. So this is where people see the samurais different. We're all watching Shogun at the minute, and it's very cool and it's very historical. But actually, what's missing is the really deep belief in magic, esoteric Buddhism, dark caves and Zen, the star gods coming down, literally, or Tengu, the dogs from heaven arrive to teach us magical things. The Yamabushi are in the mountains and they have ancient powers. One of them somewhere has been manipulated into being used as a ninja. Somebody's dressed as a Yamabushi to go across because they're allowed to move in that. They have to teach about the stars, like Egypt and ancient Greece and modern witchcraft. The stars are important. Polaris, the god, comes from Polaris in Nojiri. It visits down on the ground and gives its dragon comes down and gives its prophecy and its system of warfare to Hagihara, the Hagihara family. And these are all true samurai, true stories. This is what is inside that deepness when studying the ninja. So we could go on and tell you, well, this emotion is this and that emotion is that and this, but you're missing the richness of the ninja behind it all.
So let's move back to the psychology of a shinobi, not the psychology they're using, because in this Kusunoki cluster, that's Niso Daigo. So we've accomplished the task. Niso Daigo is the psychology of the Kusunoki shinobi. But when we talk about the psychology of shinobi in terms of the way shinobi think, we need to address something that Natori Sensei wrote in the Shoninki, and I'll let Anthony discuss that in detail, but the aspect that the job of a shinobi is a tough job. It's not one of glory, but it's actually one that's very difficult. It's one of secrecy, and it's one of sort of suffering and silence.
So Stephen's referring to the quote here from the Shoninki where it's like, why do you want to follow the path as a ninja? Like, brothers and fathers won't recognize each other, and it's a nightmarish path, and you know, you can be in the darkness of shadows in the forest with the maybe baying. What is the descriptive noun? What is the description of a stag rutting, you know, that type of thing? It says you could be covered in blood, you could be injured, nobody could know, and you have to show no one. And it's hard to get this quote in your mind. The Shoninki is a difficult manual because it's A, the end of a tradition, and B, all of the secrets in one, but without the fundamental understandings of the tradition. So this is Book of Samurai here, the Red Book of Samurai, and it's the start of Natori, and there's meant to be like 8 more books to go, and then at the end the Shoninki. And after you've been through, understood all the books, you go, okay, imagine, and the only way I can do it is imagine you're at the edge of your brink. Whatever you've done in your life where you were nearly at the end of your wits, you were like breaking down, and you were about to just fall on the floor and give up and die. It might be like through too much, you know, you run so far and your heart's pounding, you're going, there's just stressed up where you just got so angry, and that's it, you broke your temper, it's lost. All of that has to be pushed down, use the smile, and then when that breaking point is coming, not a peep comes out of you. This is Mumon no Ikan, the gateless gate. The gateless gate. Nobody can see. And there's in Natoryu, there's intuition, like understanding through intuition and understanding through learning and things. So for example, the stars, face reading, predictions, you know, personality types. Then there's intuition, where you're just like, I have polished my own mirror, my own mental ability so high and so highly strung and polished like a mirror that I see the problems in others. I see their issues reflected, and I'm like, I see that, I caught that. And in the Shinobi, then it talks about this quite a lot. It talks about a fish popping up the water. It says ninja is like watching a pond. So you watch it still, calm, but there's the fish. That's the same. You're walking around the neighborhood, you're listening to people, you're watching somebody, you're tracking somebody, and all of a sudden, pop, that's the information I needed. That is where I'm going with that. That's Shinobi no Jutsu.
But it also contains some great parts too. A little bit of some of the Fukushima Ryu is going to come out now. Lock picking, breaking and entering, accessing locations that you're not supposed to be. So the shinobi is never supposed to have the concept or the idea that they can't get into this place. A shinobi is never supposed to have the mindset that any location is inaccessible to them. So there is all kinds of knowledge of lock picking, lock bypassing, etc., etc., etc. And anybody who's familiar with my work knows how much I love the lockpicking. Matter of fact, if you have the translation of the Bansen Shukai, remember, flip to the front, you'll see my my lockpicking introduction. The lockpicking stuff is my jam.
The Art of Lockpicking by Stephen Nojiri. So basically, a short introduction to Japanese locks and the Art of Lockpicking by Stephen Nojiri in my book, The Book of Ninja, the Bansen Shukai. So, many, many moons ago, 11 years ago now, I think, something like that. Right, okay. So, we're not the new kids on the block anymore, Stephen. We're the oldies, but goldies. Right, okie dokie. So, the idea of psychology while infiltrating lockpicking. Now, this is where you're going to go to Chikamatsu Shigenori, Igun Koku Ninja Skills, and other smaller documents. Now, you all know yin and yang, yeah? So in and yo is the Japanese way of saying yin, and it's yin and yang. So in and yo, so in and yo, right? Basically, the Japanese way of saying these. Now, yin is darkness, hidden, subtle, muted. Yang is positive, aggressive, angry. So when you infiltrate, your psychology must sometimes be reversed. Your body is aggressive and yang, but your mind is looking for a way out of the situation. But because somebody might have spotted you, they think that's aggressive, I'm not sure I can, and it gives you that moment to get out. Or your body is yang, your body is yin, hidden, it's in the recess, it's in the dark, but your mind is yang, you're going to kill. So your body is in, but your mind is yo. Or your body is yo and your mind is in. And you shift the psychology. Or you go full yang, you go for it, or full hidden. And you're totally passive and you think, I am frost on the ground, I am nothing, I am not breathing, I have no smell, I have no fear, I am totally, I can't say the Japanese word in because it sounds too much like the English in, but I'm totally yin, I'm gone. Yep, switching psychology as you infiltrate and exit.
So this actually has two levels. So the first level is external places. There is no external place that's going to keep a shinobi out. That's the mindset of the shinobi. That's the psychology of the shinobi. They are either going to pick the lock, break the lock, bypass the lock, sneak in somehow, or they're going to pretend to be someone else, someone, a false identity, and gain access. No location can keep the shinobi out. That same mentality applies to the minds of people. There is no person on this planet that the shinobi is not going to be able to manipulate, be able to read, be able to manipulate, be able to get into that person's mind. So there is no external location that is off limits, and there is nobody's mind that is off limits. The shinobi has a mindset that they are free to travel and have the capability to get into any of these places. So let's take these 3 points that I've really worked on in this video, and that is 1, securing betrayals, 2, the Niso Daigo, personality types, and 3, the psychology of believing that you can get into anywhere. And you put those together, and what do you get? You get a samurai spy who believes that he can get into any location and get into anybody's mind. He has a psychological system, the Niso Daigo, a methodology of which to identify personality types and then how to manipulate personality types. And then he manipulates the personality type in order to secure a betrayal and get that person to do things for him. Do you see how that all lines up?
So some manuals will tell us basically that some shinobi are just the brute-like killers. They are just the hot-blooded, commando-style guys with a knife who'll go in and murder. And most likely some people were like that. Others would have it was the chubby guy who was laughing a little bit silly with his massive gonky red nose and his big dirty ears going, yeah, and he's like, nobody cares what he is, what he's doing, but they just, they don't realize what he's doing, and he's listening and in and out of the enemy. But there is also that other middle of the row guy, ninja, if you like, shinobi no mono, where they basically, it's hard to say this, but basically it's a very well trained, it's what you imagine a ninja would be, but more fit, healthy, aggressive killers, working in a family unit, a gang-like family unit. They hold family secrets. They have, in these secrets are the traditions of magic, astrology, psychology, profiling people, torture, extortion, thievery. Yep. But they are not doing it for personal gain. They are samurai working for a lord. That lord has said, that lord has a big plan with his Hatamoto command group or his inner circle. He's got a big plan. And he's like, we're going to take that province. We're going to kill them. They've read Sun Tzu. They're up to date on Sun Tzu. They've won various battles. They've lost some battles. And in that, they say, how many shinobi do we have? Well, we've got bloodthirsty killer types. Right, put them in the army. They are going to check the army. We've got your fat merchants who language specialists. Put them out into the world. Let them start feeding stuff back. Put 20 of them out there. Okay, how much money do we have for spies? This much. Right, what about the rest? Well, we've got high profile living spies from the Gokan, the 5 types of spy. We've got some living spies here who get in, get out, do their mission. They go out and they have a collection of abilities about them, and one of them is the psychology of other people. Yes, they can break into places. Yes, they can do this. Yes, they can do that. But they can also make sure. Sorry, my stepdaughter came in then. Maisie Moo was like, I'm taking Bolt for a walk. Bloody hell. filming. Get out. So basically, that person's got to go out into the world, and they're not going to be like, ha ha, you know, Monty Python style, killing everybody. They're going to be like, right, I've got a safe house there. They get to a safe house. The guy at the safe house, the chubby guy who's been all over the place, or the little skinny guy, like, right, where are my targets? Well, I've been listening to him. I've been listening to them. You've got him, and him. That gatekeeper's name is this. He changes here. His daughter's precious to, okay, well, kidnap her. Right, kidnap the daughter. Right, he loves money. Okay, get your cash out. Let's give him money. And they run a conspiracy in that area of the castle. It might be on the west gate, that's all. It might be like, right, you take the west gate. My job might be west gate of the castle. And it's like, okay, right, kidnap his daughter. Kill that guy's enemy for him. So he'll be indebted to us. Oh, you've been giving that guy like tons of cash and rewards. He's indebted anyway. Okay, we've got a female maid working in the manor of the person who's the guard on the night shift that we need. Okay, all that. And all these threads. Sun Tzu says when it's a massive thread. It's a big spider's web of conspiracy. And it's all there with a lovely little dashing of, right, is tonight the right night? Well, it's the right night logically, but also it's the right night according to the stars. It's the right direction. The moon's in the right direction. Polaris is coming from there. Okay, right, all right, we've got all that going. Right, operate tonight. Murder that guy. Kidnap that niece. Pay that man off. We're going. Now, rest of us, boot up. Commando stuff on. Knives out. In we go. Right. And on the other side of the 4-mile castle, because these castles go on, you see a flame erupt, and it's like, right, East Gate have started. Right, flags are gone. That's the signal. West Gate go. Next thing, the castle falls. You're in there. People on the inside turn on them. All of it is due to planning after planning after planning, listening, eyes and ears, eyes and ears, eyes and ears.
So yes, shinobi run around at night setting things on fire. That is one of the skill sets. But to quote the Bansenshukai, or to go to the Bansenshukai, I'll let Anthony explain this a little more. Your jonin and your chunin are the samurai espionage agents sent by their lord into enemy territory. But those genin, those guys running around at night in black, setting things on fire and getting killed by guards, those are usually the locals that have been turned. Do you understand the difference? So this is the psychology here. So samurai spy from country A goes into country B, recruits locals in country B. Those local country B agents are the ones that run around and start fires and get killed by guards. Meanwhile, the actual shinobi is nowhere near where the fire is being set. They're nowhere near where the battle's taking place.
So Stephen's referencing here, he's referencing Jo, Chu, and Ge, which is the idea that the Jo ninjas are right at the back. As I say, he said, you go kidnap her, you go murder him, you go do that, and you go do this. He's your specialist. But he's still capable of going in and doing the dirty work. Stephen's talking predominantly about these Kunisanoki tradition there. But we do know they're predominantly sort of like pull the strings at the background, but can do it when they do it. But this is where you've also got to add, they've probably been, this is where it gets even more confusing. There's death spies, inward spies, converted spies, local spies, yeah, and living spies. And the living spies have been in and out, done everything, done all that, actually been the grunts going in and killing and getting out, and they now advise the Lord. They're experienced. They might be 40-year-old, about my age. I'm 45 now. My age, they've done enough war, they've done it, and they're now learned all the psychology, and they're running their own teams, and they're the ones who stand off, and they've got their own people who, even their own folks, they send to die, or they've sent locals to die, or they've sort of twisted the enemy spy and then have death spies going. So this is why it gets really complicated. But this video is not about the construct of ninja. It's about the psychology they use. So let's get back to that.
So again, yes, like I said earlier, the shinobi knows how to do all these things and can do these things and will do these things if necessary. But it doesn't make any sense to not use local enemy as your agents. The entire point is you can get these guys to switch sides. You can give them the basic information. In other words, you make them task-oriented, teach them a specific task, send them on assignment. You know how to do everything. They only know how to do whatever thing that you're sending them to do. And that's what you send them to do. If they live, good, you can use them again. If they die, it's a loss for the enemy. There's no loss for you. So that is probably one of the most important underlying psychological aspects of shinobi arts is use the enemy's resources, not your own.
Right, so this is again where it gets mega confusing, is we're really talking Art of War here, and you're talking the 13th chapter, okay? So this is where it's really difficult, because it's like, well, he's my spy, he's from my domain, but if the enemy converts him, because the principle is used the enemy's resources against him, like Stephen just said, that means they're using your resources against you. So your guy who's being flagged and being tracked is now, they found his weakness and he might turn. On top of that, they might bribe him with something, or on top of that, they might be like lying secret letters to say he has turned. So you have to work out who's been turned, who's not been turned, in the mess of all the spies, in the darkness of night and clandestine skills. Against all that, you've got to go, that's correct, go now. And then when you go now, it's like, oh, multiple fake walls, ambush, 100 people have just been taken out. Oh, damn, 1,000 have just been wiped out. When you've got an army of, a lot of these armies are only 2,000 or 3,000 strong, wiping out 100 men, 200, 300 men because you made the wrong call is a problem.
And you can see this in, at least within the Kusunoki cluster, you can see the clear difference between when someone is sent by their own side, then there is a concerned effort that they survive. There's a concerned effort to get them out of the enemy territory alive. When they are an enemy who's been turned into an agent, there is not much effort to make sure that they survive. So it's a clear distinction. It's a clear distinction. Even people that are sent on incredibly dangerous, potentially suicidal missions, there's still an effort to get them back, as opposed to agents that are like, well, they died, the end, right? Again, a very clear distinction between your actual shinobi versus enemy turncoats.
So let's quickly round up. Okay, shinobi have to deal with A, their own mental state, and B, the manipulation of other people's mental states. They have to get a situation on their side. They have to use the resources of the enemy, and they have to keep their own agents alive and stop them from being turned, okay? This is boiled down to eyes and ears. You've got to look and listen to everything. Knowledge is power. You have to know the smallest details about people and pick out what's useless and what's useful. Some things are useless, some things are useful. You've got to have many people running the network. You've got to also make that a tight network so nobody can infiltrate it. So you need a balance between the right amount of people out there, who are the right people doing it, collecting the correct information, versus a weak leaking barrel where you're like, we can't really trust anything here. And this psychology is interlaced with lots of mythology, legends, astrology, astronomy, dark magic, swordsmanship, fighting, infiltration. You've got all of those aspects working alongside. There isn't just ninjutsu on its own. It works alongside other aspects: criminality, torture, criminal capture, using those criminals, releasing and using released criminals. There's all sorts going on. I hope you enjoyed that. For me, guys, at the minute, the best thing you can do is get a copy of the Book of Bushido. It talks about the samurai mindset, but for me, the best thing you can do is buy it on Audible, or we'll use one of your credits. And for Stephen, make sure you get his new book, Samurai Traditions of the Tadagenji, and give it a read through. Let us know what you think in the comments below. If you'd like more Stephen and Anthony videos, let us know, and we'll do some more, if we can get him out of his coffin casket.